Hello, everyone. Welcome to the San Antonio Book Festival. I know you've been attending lots of panels all day. Welcome to Lit Crawl, but remember the festival continues tomorrow and Sunday. This is America, Ripe for Satire, featuring Charles Yu and Mateo Askaripour. My name is Richard Santos. I'm a San Antonio native, but I'm now in Austin, where I'm the executive director of Austin Batcave. Before I introduce Charles and Mateo, I want to say I hope you purchase these authors' books. Even if you've already blown through your book budget, go ahead. I think there's room for one or two more books. There's a link right there on the screen where you can purchase from Nowhere Bookshop. That's the book festival's independent bookseller based right in San Antonio. We'll have time at the end for a couple of audience questions. And this is Lit Crawl, so maybe you want to hear about favorite cocktail recipes or favorite slasher films, or you have a more literary question. Either way, throw those in the Q&A, and hopefully we'll have time for a couple of them. So let me introduce Mateo and Charles. Mateo Askaripour's work aims to empower people of color to seize opportunities for advancement, no matter the obstacle. He was a 2018 Rhode Island Writers Colony Writer of Residence, and his writing has appeared in Entrepreneur, Lit Hub, Catapult, The Rumpus, Medium, and elsewhere. He lives in Brooklyn. His debut novel, Black Buck, was released in January 2021. Charles Yu is the author of 4 books, including Interior Chinatown, winner of the 2020 National Book Award. He's been nominated for 2 Writers Guild of America Awards for his work in the HBO series Westworld. He has also written for shows on FX, AMC, and HBO. His fiction and nonfiction have appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Atlantic, The Wall Street Journal, and Wired, among other publications. Let me give you just a little bit of background about the panel and the tone, and then we're going to hear a couple of pages from each of the authors. So recent events in America, and by recent I mean the past probably 240 years or so, can feel a little loony, a little off the rails, but some brilliant writers are capturing this insanity and satirizing this funny moment in these 2 acidic and brilliant new novels. Charles Yu received the National Book Award for Interior Chinatown, a deeply personal novel about race, pop culture, immigration, assimilation, and escaping the roles we are forced to play. And debut writer Mateo Askaripour's Black Buck is crackling with energy. It's about a young man given a shot at stardom as the lone black salesman, a mysterious, cult-like, and wildly successful startup where nothing is quite as it seems. I think these books really fit nicely together, and these are 2 great writers. So I'm excited to get started. We'll start by asking Charles and Mateo to read a few minutes from their work. Charles, can you go first?
Sure. Thanks, Richard, and thanks everyone for coming here. And so excited to be speaking with you and Mateo. And yeah, so this is from Interior Chinatown. I'll just read from the beginning. Interior Golden Palace. Ever since you were a boy, you've dreamt of being Kung Fu Guy. You're not Kung Fu Guy. You're currently background Oriental male, but you've been practicing. Maybe tomorrow will be the day. Interior Golden Palace. Ever since you were a boy, you've dreamt of being Kung Fu Guy. You are not Kung Fu Guy. You are currently Oriental guy making a weird face, but you've been practicing. Maybe tomorrow will be the day. Take what you can get. Try to build a life at the margin made from bit parts. Willis Wu, Asian actor. Skills. Kung Fu, moderate proficiency. Fluent in accented English. Able to do face of great shame on command. Resume. Disgraced son. Delivery guy. Silent henchman. Caught between 2 worlds. Guy who runs in and gets kicked in the face. Striving immigrant. Generic Asian man. Your mother has played in no particular order. Pretty Oriental flower. Asiatic seductress. Young dragon lady. Slightly less young dragon lady. Restaurant hostess. Beautiful maiden, number 1. Dead beautiful maiden, number 1. Old Asian woman. Your father has been, at various times, twin dragon, wizened Chinaman, guy in a soiled t-shirt, inscrutable grocery owner in a soiled t-shirt, egg roll cook, young Asian man, Sifu, the mysterious kung fu master, old Asian man. Interior Golden Palace, morning. In the world of black and white, everyone starts out as generic Asian man. Everyone who looks like you, anyway. Unless you're a woman, in which case you start out as pretty Asian woman. You all work at Golden Palace, formerly Jade Palace, formerly Palace of Good Fortune. There's an aquarium in the front and cloudy tanks of rock crabs and 2-pound lobsters crawling over each other in the back. Laminated menus offer the lunch special, which comes with a bowl of fluffy white rice and choice of soup, egg drop or hot and sour. A neon Qingdao sign blinks and buzzes behind the bar in the dimly lit space. A drop-ceiling room with lacquered, ornate woodwork, or some imitation thereof. Everything simmering in a warm, seedy red glow, thrown off by the dollar store paper lanterns festooned above. Many of them darkened by dead moths, the paper yellowing, ripped, curling in on itself. The bar is fully stocked with top-shelf spirits up top, middle-shelf liquor at eye level, and down at the bottom, a happy hour shelf of booze that you will regret for sure. The new thing everyone is excited about is called the lychee margarita teeny, which sounds like a lot of flavors. You wear the uniform, white shirt, black pants, black slipper-like shoes that have no traction whatsoever. Your haircut is not good, to say the least. Black and white always look good. A lot of it has to do with the light. They're the heroes. They get hero lighting designed to hit their faces just right. Designed to hit White's face just right, anyway. Someday you want the light to hit your face like that. To look like the hero. Or, for a moment, to actually be the hero. All right, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Wow.
Charles.
So many questions. I know we're not there yet. I need to pay the price of admission, which means reading. I would, if it's possible later, like to get to the tension of wanting to laugh at certain things, but then also like holding back and be like, should I? But everyone in the audience, you better get your questions too in the Q&A, or Richard and I are just going to take it away with Charles. All right, kicking off also from the beginning of Black Buck. I'm going to start with the author's note. And for those who haven't read the book, the author's note is written by my protagonist, Darren, who then becomes Buck. I've been told from people that they thought the author's note was written and signed by me and that this book was actually nonfiction. And they read the whole thing thinking it was a nonfiction book. So I'm just letting you all know. All right, the epigraph reads, the most unprofitable item ever manufactured is an excuse. John Mason. Author's note. There's nothing like a black man on a mission. No, let me revise that. There's nothing like a black salesman on a mission. He's Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, and any other supernatural, paranormal, or otherwise godlike combination of blood, flesh, and brains. He can't die. Don't believe me? MLK. Yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a black salesman. In the same way used car salesmen hawk overpriced hunks of metal that break down once an unsuspecting customer drives off the lot, our man ML to the goddamn K was a salesman to the highest degree. Not only did he sell black people on the vision of a unified America, but he also sold the United States Supreme Court, which at the time contained 9 white men, the hardest decision makers for any black man to convince. MLK, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Frederick Douglass were all salesmen. Hell, Nina Simone, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, and every other black woman who achieved any leap of success was a saleswoman. Oprah, hide a BMW under your seat. Winfrey is a saleswoman. You get the point. Each and every one of these people was selling something more precious than gold. A vision for what the world could look like if millions of people were to change their minds. The hardest thing to change. How do I fit into all of this? Well, I shut up and get to the point. Don't worry, I'm getting there. I'm a black man on a mission. No, I'm a black salesman on a mission. And the point of this book, which I'm writing from my penthouse overlooking Central Park, is to help other black men and women on a mission to sell their visions all the way to the top. So high up that I'll have to crane my neck, like one of those goofy white people in films deciding whether a superhero is a bird or a plane, just to catch a glimpse of them before they're out of sight. Whoosh, bang, poof, the great disappearing act of success. My goal is to teach you how to sell. And if I'm half the salesman every newspaper, blog, and hustler in New York City says I am, then you are in luck. With my story, I will give you the tools to go out and create the life you want, to overcome every seemingly impossible obstacle, to fix the game. Which game, you ask? We'll get there. But before we do, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. 1, let down your guard and open your mind to what I'm going to tell you. I know we're strangers right now. You're likely asking yourself why you should trust me. The good thing is that you already bought this book, so you trusted me enough to part with $26. I won't let you down. 2, understand that I want all people to be successful. But in the same way that Starbucks can't just give out mocha frappuccinos to anyone who doesn't have $14, I can't help everyone. So I'm starting with black people. If you're not black but have this book in your hands, I want you to think of yourself as an honorary black person. Go on, do it. Don't go don blackface in an afro, but picture yourself as black. And if you want, you can even give yourself a fancy black name, like Jamal, Imani, or Asia. 3, say every day is Deals Day and clap your hands. I know it's strange, but do it. And when you do, think of the number 1 thing you're working toward. It may be a new car, a promotion, someone's affection, or an expensive pair of shoes. Whatever it is, think of it and say, every day is Deals Day, and clap your hands as loud as you can. As you'll find out, every day is Deals Day. A day without deals is like a camel without humps. It doesn't exist. At this point, your heart's beating if there's a twinkle in your eye. I know because I've given this speech before. I've given it to myself. I've given it to thousands of people wanting to change their lives. And I've given it to people who didn't know they wanted to change but needed it. A long time ago, I was one of these people. I was like you, ambitious but afraid, intelligent but impotent, curious but cowardly. I was all of this and more. But freedom, true freedom, the kind where you do what you want without fear, comes at a cost. It's like my urban corner philosopher cum fairy god Uncle Wally Cat used to say. You can change the hands of a clock, but you can't change time. I can give you the tools to change, but only you can change yourself. And if I am successful in teaching you how to sell and fix the game, I ask that you buy another copy of my book and give it to the friend who needs it most, who is stuck like I was and in need of a way out, who is blind to the game but has potential, just like you. Does that sound fair? If so, and if you can do the 3 things I outline above, then we have a deal. And if we have a deal, time for you to do one last thing. Turn the page. Happy selling. Buck.
Thank you very much, Mateo. Yeah, no, let's jump into basically to the question that Mateo already posed. You know, for the audience, I'm glad that those of y'all that haven't read the book, I'm glad that these guys started from the beginning, because it really sets that tone of humor, but also these are serious topics of race, assimilation, money, class, everything, stereotypes, open, overt racism. But yet, there's also like a lot of humor. You guys come at these topics from a different angle. So, you know, let's talk about that kind of laughing through the pain. You know, like why is that the approach to take? And you know, I'm also curious from the craft standpoint is how you walk that line between like, okay, this is good and this is still funny, versus like, ooh, is that too far? Is that not far enough? You know, because I know those moments are happening too.
Want to take it, Charles?
Sure. Yeah, laughing through the pain seems right. I think there's a little bit of like, I don't know that I kind of rev my engine a lot, is what my editor calls it, when I'm just sort of running in place and doing something that looks like writing, but I'm not really, the gears haven't engaged. And I usually know when something's happening if I either smile at it or if it's like, ooh, you know, I'm getting a little uncomfortable. Like those are my 2 sort of compasses for when I'm getting into something. So, yeah, I never know if it's actually going to be funny to someone else, but if I'm like mildly amused by what I wrote, then I'll just keep it till I realize that, you know, I can do better.
That's funny. Yeah, for me, Richard, and everyone, I definitely had many moments when I was like, I might be going too far, and I kept some of those in. But I also took some out because I thought that they would just, distract from the intention of the book itself. But for me, the humor was injected for a few reasons. One, because that's how my mind works, right? There might be tragedy that takes place. There's tragedy that takes place every day in America, right? That's just part of living in this country and this world in general, regardless of who you are. So I might look at a tragedy and really internalize it and feel bad about it, and then a couple hours or a day later, try to poke absurdity at the situation of it, especially if it deals with systemic racism, because we see how much of it is actually really funny because it's so absurd. Sometimes the things that happen, right? So on the face, they could be dangerous and harmful, but then on the flip side, for example, right, like the insurrection. For me, I was like, this is crazy. But then I also looked at it as like, it looks like these dudes just watched Braveheart yesterday for the first time, and they're at the Capitol waving flags in the air and trying to rally a Mel Gibson like crowd of warriors. So that's the way that my mind works. So it was no stretch to imprint it onto the page in that way. It was also a matter of authenticity for me, right? I can't speak for Charles, I can't speak for you, but I would imagine that your realities are somewhat like mine, where you don't wake up and you're like, shit, I'm a person of color, sucks to be me, right? That's not how we think, even though that we have daily struggles. And there is levity, there are triumphs and successes. I mean, Charles won the National Book Award. Come on, I saw him give a speech, he was smiling, right? So the point is that for me to render my reality and the reality of so many of us and the reality of this character, Darren, authentically, it couldn't be 400 pages of doom and gloom and tragedy and trauma. There had to be levity, there had to be humor, and in some ways the humor underscores the horror.
Yeah. And I like that point you make, Mateo, about just waking up every day, because these two characters they're kind of just guys, like they're kind of just trying to live their life. Like Darren does not want to leave his job at Starbucks. He fights. Yeah. He fights leaving that job really, really, really hard. So I'm always kind of curious about where, like, when you start like setting these characters in motions, like how much fun you have putting obstacles in their ways, but also their inventions. I know characters don't necessarily come from somewhere, but how much of this gets grounded in your own lived experiences.
Yeah, I mean, that question right there makes me think of one for Charles. Like, Charles, was it hard to put Willis through the things that you put him through?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I don't think I put him through nearly as much as Darren / Buck went through, I have to say. So I'll flip the question on you after I try to answer it, but if that's okay. Yeah. I mean, I felt like it needed to be a little bit painful. It needed to go to some places where I didn't know where it was headed, and then when I realized where it was headed, there was some hesitation of like, oh, do I want to do this to him? This is supposed to be light, and funny, and then that's where I found the book, is when I took it to places a little bit beyond where I thought. So, but yeah, how was it to for you in terms of like, did you have it mapped out, or did you kind of find yourself step by step getting to? I don't want to spoil anything or speak for the book.
A lot of it was step by step, figuring out as I went along. I mean, I knew who I wanted him to be. I knew the generalities of the circumstances that I wanted him to be in and where he was going to come from. And I did know about the big twist at the end, but everything else I wasn't sure about. I wasn't sure about the characters or the scene. So I did have a lot of fun while writing the book, but there were definitely a handful of parts that were very difficult. And it was difficult to subject Darren to all of that passive and overt racism in the workplace. It wasn't easy, right? Because I knew that, and I know it now more than I did then, but I believed that people were going to see themselves in Darren, right? Regardless of if they looked like him or not. I knew that people were going to see themselves in his mother, in his best friends, and his girlfriends, and so forth. So it was hard for him to allow things to happen and then turn around and hurt people who loved him unconditionally as well, especially Black and brown folk. But I was hoping that it would illuminate the dangers of chasing certain forms of success. And we see the same, right, to a lesser extent, with Willis. He's chasing this dream. So, I mean, and I know now we're like ping ponging, but I'm seeing many similarities in terms of people chasing success that they might actually believe is success in how they define it, or it's been pushed on them by society. And then they go into what we now have the term for, which is the sunken place, right? Thanks to Get Out. Like, do you feel like Willis was chasing a narrative of success that he'd always really wanted, or just that he thought because of his role as generic Asian man, he had to follow on this trajectory?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to frame it. I think it's closer to the latter. You know, I think it's one of those things where, and I can identify this with a bit, but you know, it's one of those things where he's doing it without thinking very hard about why he's doing it at first. He thinks this is something he wants, and he hasn't really questioned, oh, what am I going to have to do to get what I want? You know, what does it mean to actually get that? And meaning to become Kung Fu guy, you know? And as you're saying, I think both of our protagonists seem to have a very similar setup of entering this constructed world where there's like a hierarchy, basically, right? And there's rules, and how well they play a certain role will define how high they can rise at cost.
And Aaron seems to know it. You know, that's why he fights so much at the beginning. Like, he knows it's not going to go well. Like, he knows what he's going to face, even if he doesn't quite totally form. He gets warned by everybody.
He still gets lost. It's like some of those people who think they're too smart to be conned, and those are the ones who are actually conned, right? He sees what could happen and probably would happen, but he still gets indoctrinated into the church that is someone, which makes it, I think, that much more difficult for readers to stomach. I have many people who email me and they say, listen, man, I get it, but I hated Darren for 80% of the book because of who he turned into and how he fell. And I say, mission accomplished, thanks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, Mateo, you've talked about how your own experience, like working for sales, working for a startup, and how, you know, like you've been pretty honest in some interviews about like wanting to like warn people that they need to be careful what they walk into. But still, like, there's still these like the sales tips that are interspersed throughout the book are like legitimate sales tips. Like, people are also going to walk away from this book maybe like a little bit better at their jobs. So, you know, that's an interesting tension I'd like to hear more about.
Yeah. Real quick, I just got a question now based off of that. It's like we got this like weird triangle where you're saying something, you're giving me a thought. I want to ping it to Charles and answer. So, basically talking about the form, right, and those sales tips, and I know that this is something that we were probably going to discuss anyway. For those who don't know, you know, Interior Chinatown is set up as a screenplay. So cool. And in my novel, there are exactly. Boom. He got the font and everything, the typewriter font. And then in Black Buck, there are sales tips and pieces of advice interspersed throughout that are very conspicuously bolded and addressed to the reader. And set apart from the different paragraphs, before and after.
Like, you pull them out and put them on a poster and like sell it at like, you know.
Well,
like,
people have spoken about creating a little Buck's little black book of sales tips. But basically, I want to ask Charles, did you always envision this as a screenplay, or did you think that there was another entry point for it?
I tried to write other entry points and I failed miserably for a long time. So when this started happening, I was really hesitant because it felt honestly a little bit gimmicky, or like, can I sustain that? And will readers want that for a whole book? But the form started to talk to the substance in a way that I couldn't let go of it. And it just felt like the right form for it. Same with the second person. And I think this is maybe another really interesting thing. You know, it's told in second person, which I didn't settle on until later because I really had a resistance to it. But it functions in a couple of ways. But I think it functions in a way to make, I hope, the reader pulled into Willis Whereas in Black Buck, it sort of feels like the direct address rules feel like, I don't know, it creates this really cool space where I don't know, I'm just curious how you sort of constructed that voice and tone.
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted Black Buck to function as a sales manual as well. Like I wanted it to be an engaging narrative, but to also double as a sales manual. So as Richard said, that if people follow along with Buck's journey, as well as, read these sales tips, then they will walk away with a leg up, I would hope. Whether it means advocating for themselves better in an interview and asking for more money, or attaining a base level or base proficiency in sales, or just feeling empowered to speak up for themselves in certain situations. And fortunately, I have received messages of people saying that that's what's actually happening in their real lives. But I didn't plan to break the fourth wall, other than the author's note, until the fourth draft of the book. And I remember I had pitched some agents, but a couple things hit me. One was when I got into sales at this startup, one of the co-founders handed me 2 sales books by a man named Jeffrey Gitomer. And it was the Little Red Book of Selling and the Sales Bible. And those books were beautiful. They were wrapped in cloth and there were glossy pages. And it was just no BS, non-esoteric, this is how to sell, that really resonated with me when I was 22. And then I think beforehand I had read How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia by Mohsen Hamed. And in the beginning of every part or chapter, there is a piece of advice or a rule, right? Stash away some money, learn how to be corrupt, befriend bureaucrats, and so forth. So when I was working on Black Buck, I was reading Mitchell S. Jackson's The Residue Years, and he breaks the fourth wall in a very subtle way by writing people. And when he's saying people, comma, he's addressing the reader. So that, what I was reading in front of me, just hit me. And then I remembered those other books I had read years ago, and I told myself, or I said, hey, I already want this to function as a sales manual. Why don't I take it a step further and start including these tips and make it really conspicuous? I want the reader to feel like this is a manual in some ways. And I also wanted, for the more difficult portions of the book, for them to know that there's an older Darren, at least a few years removed, speaking to them, and that they will hope, that he has learned from whatever crazy type of shit's going on right now, and that they will stay along for the ride. So those are a few reasons why I did it. I found that a lot of people enjoy it, but then there are people who told me hey, it takes me out of the narrative. And I really wish that I wouldn't have been taken out of the narrative. And I say, that's cool.
Well, I mean, that's also kind of what the experience of being a person of color in some of these environments is.
Ooh, I like that.
And Charles, with your structure, I mean, I can't help but wonder. I mean, you've done amazing work for TV, award-winning work. Did part of you worry, and it's okay if you want to slide around this answer, did part of you worry man, if I publish this, no one's gonna hire me again. They're gonna think that like talking about them. They're gonna think I'm talking about this show or whatever. It's kind of a brave move, I gotta say.
I had a lot of worries. I can't say that was on the top of my list. I did wonder what people would think, though. Is this guy is this what he's thinking when he's in the room with us, or is this what he's thinking about? Or does this guy think this is actual screenwriting? Which if I actually turn this in, with 10-page sort of internal digressions, then obviously no one would film that. Yeah,
I mean, gonna get, right? You're just gonna give him the book.
Yeah, there you go.
Terrence Malick, I bet.
Exactly. I had a little practice with that, and I'm curious to hear what Mateo thinks about this. But from all the years I was a lawyer, I just felt like I had a secret identity, or a shameful, closet that I went into of oh, I'm a writer, that's a dirty thing that I do. And so I'm sort of used to having that part of me just be something I just keep for myself. And, then eventually, of course, it goes out in the world, and that's weird. But the whole time I'm doing it, I'm usually no one's ever going to read this, even when I know it's going to get published. It's so, yeah.
That's funny, because it's you look at Interior Chinatown and you're how could you think that no one was going to read that? what? It's so different and so necessary. For me, it's so funny, Richard, because I felt like you were in my head a little bit when you started off asking Charles this question. Like for me, Black Buck is like a face tattoo. There's no way that I could work in sales again at like a startup or a corporation, you know. And people have asked me like, "Oh, could you come work for a company?" I'm like, "You read Black Buck and you want me to work there?" Like, this is because I don't hide behind it. Like, this is what I think to a certain extent. And there's many characters in it, right? There's a character who's like some white supremacist, and I don't think like him. I had to inhabit his mind, but a lot of I don't hide behind the satire. That's what I'm saying, right? Or the fiction. But when I was writing Black Buck, I was in a place where I had drummed up enough courage where I didn't care really like what people were going to think all that much. To a certain extent, I wanted folk, especially Black and brown people, to enjoy it or at least feel empowered. I wanted to spark thought and elicit many feelings within people. But for me, when I was on my journey to publishing, Black Buck was the third manuscript that I ever wrote. The first two didn't go anywhere, right? It didn't earn me an agent, didn't get me a book deal or what have you. And part of it was because I didn't know what I was doing. Another part of it was that I was trying to pander to the industry. While I was working on Black Buck, I started to publish essays, you know, with LitHub, Medium, and so forth. And some of those essays were deeply personal, where I was having nightmares about people I grew up with reading them, people I worked with reading them, like Charles was saying, letting them into my heart and my mind, whereas previously they didn't know that I had all of these thoughts about race, right? They didn't know that I had all these thoughts or feelings brimming up or boiling up inside of me. So those essays were a training ground, again, for me, really trying to shore up a lot of courage, because I was nervous and I was afraid as I was publishing them. But by the time I got to Black Buck, I said, I'm going to write the book I want for the people I wanted to serve in the way that I want. And that's what happened.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, this conversation reminds me of Mary Karr's The Art of Memoir, where she addresses, there's a whole chapter about like, I want to write about my family, but they're all alive and they're all going to hate me. And she gives lots of great advice, but she also ends a chapter roughly saying, you know, and also most of them aren't going to read it, so you don't actually have to worry about the family hating you. So, audience, remember we do have time to go to audience questions in about 10, 15 minutes or so. So there's your warning to start putting them in the chat if you haven't been already, or in the Q&A tab. Sorry. Mateo, I'm kind of curious to hear about like your writing process, because I've seen you mention that it involves like the night before and waffles and yerba mate and maybe some dancing and all sorts of things.
Yeah, pentagrams, man. I burn a pentagram into my bed sheets every night and sell my soul. No, so it does begin the night before. It is pretty extensive and somewhat neurotic, where I tell myself I'm going to write the next day, so that when I wake up, there's no question about it. In the same way I'm going to brush my teeth, right, or eat breakfast, I'm going to write, because I told myself the day before. It involves, you know, meditation, just trying to chill out a bit. As you said, waffles. There is a waffle every day that I'm writing. Make it now with a waffle maker. My mom said, stop buying those frozen waffles. Here's a waffle maker from Cuisine Art. They don't pay me royalties to say that, but that's just what it is. My beverage is yerba mate. For those who don't know, Google it. That gets my heart pumping, makes me feel good, connected to the earth in some way. And then there's like 2 to 3 hours worth of music videos and movie trailers, just to get inspired and just to learn about what's out there. Say it again.
Still the night before? We're still in the night before?
No. We're the next day. The only thing the night before is just telling myself I'm gonna write. So yeah, once I'm sufficiently inspired, there's a little dancing, and then there's an inspiration folder with a bunch of different people's faces, right? Nina Simone, Maya Angelou, Malcolm X, Frederick Douglass, Fred Hampton, Dave Chappelle, Oprah, people whose work I really admire, and I believe created fearlessly, or at least pushed through fear. And they also were so unabashedly themselves while they were living. So, you know, I commune with them for a little bit, and then it's time to write, and that's what comes out. You know, it's different, you know, working on things now post to Black Buck, but that was most certainly the routine as I was writing, and allowed me to push the envelope, if you will.
Yeah, I mean that sounds amazing, and
But
it
Charles
also
trying to keep a straight face the whole time. He's like, this guy's wild. He's crazy.
No, no, no.
I think you up like 4 p.m. or something, right? Like that's your routine is wake up before the family.
Oh, mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, I run 9 miles and I eat 4 raw eggs, and then did I read an interview or maybe your acknowledgments, Mateo, that yeah, you also watched a couple hours of like music videos on YouTube.
Yeah, it's probably acknowledgments. Yeah.
Yeah. Which sometimes I do that. Recently, this is how old I am, only discovered that you could loop something on YouTube just by right clicking. I thought you had to like click play every time or find someone.
I don't even know that. I never even did that. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I sometimes do is I find a song that is or something that's somewhat non-distracting. They also, people are kind enough to put on these 6 hours of Mozart or whatever, just something that's non-vocal, instrumental, and so that's sometimes what I do, and I have to get in the right headspace as well. The problem with me is I am a very good procrastinator, so I will find things to do until I have just enough time that I can't quite get into the right headspace, and I've frittered away most of the day. So that's often how it goes for me, to be honest. And then I get writing done in very short bursts, partly because I think it's all the subconscious that's working during all that time that I'm messing around. So it's a very chaotic, unprogrammed way of working.
No, I think we all can relate to that subconscious and the percolation of ideas, because I think to folks who don't write or don't personally know writers, they're like, okay, why are you just spending hours sitting around, right, and thinking? But even as we all know, right, if you're sleeping and you're thinking about those ideas before you go to sleep, I found that when I wake up or when I'm trying to write the next day or a couple of days later, things have worked themselves out to a certain extent. Which is beautiful. I know that we're gonna have audience questions in a bit, but I gotta get this question out. So when I was reading Interior Chinatown, Charles, I was like, there were times when I was like, whoa, it feels like lines are being blurred right now, because they were in a scene or on a set, especially with black and white, but then it's piercing the reality of the world that I thought was happening, especially with someone like Black, right? So in Black Buck, I intentionally blurred lines so that the burden or the responsibility would be placed on the reader to figure out like what's what. Not so much what is like reality, what's actually happening, but more so what is satirical, what is absurd, and what is too real that is really reality, but you can't believe it. So I wanted to ask you, were you constantly trying to blur lines, or was that just a byproduct of the writing process, or did I just completely misread it?
No, you're totally you read it just right, and I love I didn't think of it as blurred lines in Black Buck. The way I think of it is you have these different levels of reality that if I were to try to write down the rules of the world, in a kind of TV sense or whatever sense, I don't know that I could, but the net effect is to feel it much more complex and lifelike, that there are these that I can't boil it down to a simple set of rules. And I think I did get questions from my editor and agent who were very smart readers, and they were like, okay, what's going on at this moment? Because it feels like you have broken a rule that you kind of created in the first section of the book. It now feels like you're crossing that boundary. And my first reaction was to get a little bit defensive, to be honest. It's like, you just don't understand, you don't know what it's like to be Asian man. And then my second reaction was like, oh yeah, they're right. And then my third reaction was like, don't try to fix it, try to explain it. And I think when I had to explain it, they're like, okay, we get it. You're not going for logical consistency necessarily. You're going for something more than that. And and then they helped me do that, so.
Yeah, no, that I read that fully, and it was just so cool because it can put you, and Richard brought this up earlier. It can put you in the position of people who live through those types of things where there is oftentimes a level of surrealness or surreality to life, and you're like, is this actually happening? What logic is there? And it could feel like you're in a damn Guernica, Picasso's painting. So that's cool.
I love that we're coming back to the structure of both these books, which really is like, I can also tell this is too like inside baseball for probably most people, but I'm like, man, this was just such a great alliance of agent to author to agent to editor and everyone one of those people and all the other ones along the way. If one of them is like, then like we don't see this book, or it turns into like, I love it, but why I need it to be completely different, and then it's just loses everything. Like, so I know that there are writers in the audience now who are scared to keep doing their weird thing that they're doing because it's too weird, because they think no one will like it, because they think it's too far or too extreme, or the structure's too strange. So what would you say to those writers?
I would say, one, read Black Buck, because I have to ride the line here. I am a judge for an award this year, so I'm technically not supposed to endorse a book that's eligible for an award. But one, I'm extremely excited to be talking to Mateo about his book, and it's just such a great example of form, as a sales manual, and that takes you to places that you couldn't have imagined. And to me, it breaks a lot of boundaries. It's what fiction can do, in that. I think it's the power of the imagination and of not following any rules. So I think, to me, that's what I'm striving for as I write as well, is to forget what I think I know or am allowed to do or not. Like, in some ways, I feel like the first things I wrote were the most free because I had no idea, like, what I didn't know. And now when I approach things, it's with a lot of fear of like, oh, I'm just going to mess this up, or how do I write around, mistakes, or write around my weaknesses? And so that's how I think about it. I don't know. What do you think, Mateo?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to the audience. Like, first of all, having someone as smart as Richard, read my book and talk it up, and then Charles, like, hearing him talking about my book that way, it's cool as shit. Just to let you all know, like, my book just came out in January. It's my first book. Like, it's really cool. I was watching this guy Charles get his National Book Award live, like last year. I watched him be like, I won. So this is a surreal experience for me. That's the first thing I'm gonna say. Two is that whatever thing that you're doing that's weird, especially if you haven't seen it done before, haven't seen it done often, I believe that that's a good thing, and that's going to set you apart from everything else that's out there. Now, this is the salesman in me. When you're querying an agent or discussing it with someone in the publishing industry, you got to come correct, and that means coming with confidence, knowing how you present it, and speaking articulately and competently about your work. So you could be working on something that's about like an elephant who births a giraffe. I just made that up. And you wouldn't query an agent saying, so I'm writing this thing called Giraffe, and I don't really know if anyone's going to want it, but like, yeah, no, you got to say, so I wrote this thing and it comes from this place in my mind, and I believe that it's going to do this, that, and the other. And it's really just an allegory of what it means to be a hybrid of two things in the intersection of identities. You see what I'm saying? Right? And I've had practice at this from making thousands of sales calls, but I believe that if you present your work intentionally and you discuss your intentions, then people will be more readily or more likely to accept it because you are now the expert of it. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Mateo, maybe you're not going to be hired by a startup, but I want to hire you to be my literary agent for my
I would never wish being a literary agent on anyone, Richard.
But we've got some good questions here. We'll ask. We should have time to ask a couple. I want to ask Scott's question. Scott wonders if Charles and Mateo think there are limits to what satire can accomplish in a country that continues to exceed its own absurdity. The insurrection Mateo mentioned is just one example. I also can't. I always remember after 9/11 when there were all those like thoughtful think pieces about how no one would be ironic ever again. So yeah, are there limits, maybe particularly in this country?
I feel like Charles would have a smart answer. I see him thinking.
I don't know if I was thinking, I hope Mateo goes first.
I mean, yeah, I could think of something real quick. I mean, I'm going to be honest, and I say this often, but I feel weird saying it here due to the nature of this event. But like, I've never really called Black Buck satire. It has satirical elements and absurdist elements for sure, but I could see most of the shit happening. Like, to be completely honest, and what I found, especially from speaking with such a wide spectrum of people, is that absurdity is in the eye of the beholder. I wasn't looking to write the state of the nation as 2020 or 2021. I was writing this in 2018. For me, I was just discussing a moment which is connected to a series of moments that have gotten us to where we are today. That's what I was looking to do. I was looking to have fun with it while not shying away from the reality. So to answer your question, Scott, I think satire is limitless, right? As long as you don't limit yourself to thinking that just what you're writing is satire. I don't know if that's a sufficient answer. I'd love to hear what Charles says.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you went first, because I was going to piggyback off that in a way. I didn't. I don't know that I sat down and thought I will write something satirical. It's like, let me write reality in a way that feels like it says something to me anyway, and maybe turn it up 5%. But maybe America's in a place now where reality is doing most of your work for you. Sadly.
Yeah, I almost feel like if you go in with that, I'm going to write a satire mindset, that's when it turns into caricature. That's when it turns into like just kind of showing off on the page, right? Instead of grounding characters. There's an interesting question from Carly here that we've sort of touched on this a little bit, but it'd be good to hear a little bit more. Carly notes, one similarity between these two excellent books is that both main characters gain some success and status by falling into the white status quo and playing the game, so to say. Was that on purpose, and was that a goal when you started the books?
For me, it was, just to jump in, I felt like, whether it's a deliberate or a more of a subconscious thing, I knew that Willis's low point would actually be when he reached the high point of his career arc, and that what he was going into was going to cost him things that he didn't realize it was going to cost him. And so I think, part of both the fun of the book and the sort of the meat of the book was to watch him as he rises up and has to learn rules and basically buy into a system that he probably thought wouldn't have him, but then it will have him, but on its terms. So
this just, no spoilers, but there was a part in Interior Chinatown when I was like, Willis, this is seriously the path that you're taking, man. Like, it was gonna be perfect, and then this, I was like, what is my man doing? Which is great. It was a good experience to have. In terms of Black Buck, we see him working at an all-white tech startup. So you could say that he is buying into the white status quo, sure. But when I was thinking about it, it was more so the American version of success, which I guess we could say is a white version of success, based on the people who founded America and manifest destiny and all of those things, because startups have all of that. A sense of manifest destiny, that we are pioneers and we're building a better world through building a more ergonomic chair or a better washing machine. And you're like, no, you're not, homie. You're not curing cancer. And that's the life that I actually lived too when I was working at a startup. So that's what I was trying to throw into question. What is success, and what does it mean when someone who seems to have it all in their own relative way, trying to chase this American version of you needing power, status, money, and influence. And we see the devastating consequences of it in the book.
Nice. Mateo, could you talk a little bit about you mentioned this organization on your website, Defy Ventures. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Definitely. So I actually had an event with them. I don't know if it was this week or last week. Pandemic time has messed me up. But yeah, so Defy Ventures is an organization that I began volunteering with last December. And basically what they do is they help previously incarcerated individuals build and maintain businesses. So after, I got my book deal and I had a little bit more time, I stopped consulting with text artists, but I said, how can I take my business knowledge as well as what I'm learning, through having written this book and help other people? And then I thought of Defy, which I had known about years ago, and they're just a great organization. They are across the entire country. Defy Ventures, look them up. Great place. And anyone, from any walks of life, like you can volunteer even now during the pandemic. You can run a workshop that you think would benefit people who are currently and previously incarcerated.
Interesting. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for telling us about that. I'm curious to hear about any books that you think are in the sort of DNA of these two titles.
Ooh, I'd love to hear what Charles.
Like I'm trying to stay away from using the word like influenced by, but that are back there somewhere.
Yeah, I feel like I got a little bit of the DNA code from your acknowledgments, Mateo. Or maybe I don't know if that's DNA or just inspiration, like mood boarding.
Yeah.
I read this book a long time ago by Irving Goffman, which forms the kind of conceptual basis for a lot of these ideas. I didn't think of it like, oh, I'm applying Goffman to race now. Not that I thought of that. Lots of people have done that, but that I didn't. That wasn't. It was only after kind of Willis popped into existence. I was like, oh, I can use a bunch of Goffman epigraphs now and just kind of smuggle them in. Makes me seem smarter. So that was definitely one book. I did read Paul Beatty's The Sellout, as I was writing this, and I hate to say, I would never use the word influence. I would not presume to say like I could even approach what he did, but I just loved that book. I think it's brilliant, and so I couldn't get it off my mind.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. This is so cool because the Sellout for me was a book that gave me permission to write Black Buck. I read The Sellout. I'm pretty sure before I ever began writing Black Buck. And I don't remember how much time was before. I'd have to check, but I read it and I said, this shit is crazy. What? And then I said, it not only got published, but it won the Man Booker. I said, this guy won a prestigious award from writing this too. So when I read that, I felt as though I now had permission to honestly write whatever I wanted, and maybe it would still get published. Now, of course, right? It's funny. I ran into big writer Jason Reynolds, who's now a friend. If you don't know who Jason Reynolds is, look him up. That's the homie. I ran into him at McNally Jackson on Prince Street in Soho, New York City, and that was before I knew him. And I was like, "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" He's like, "Yeah." And then we spoke for about 8 minutes. I don't know why I remember it, but it was like 8 minutes. And I said, "Did you read The Sellout?" He's like, "Yeah, of course." And then I said, "Yeah, what do you think, man? Like, I'm thinking about maybe doing something like that." And I'll never forget it. He said, "Listen, man, you got to be good enough to do that. So if you're going to attempt something that really pushes the line like that, you better be able to stick the landing." So yeah, reading The Sellout made me feel as though if I could achieve my aims, then maybe people would be receptive to them. And then a book that I only read last August. So I mean, Black Buck was done and I guess being copy edited or proofread at that point. I read The Spook Who Sat by the Door by Sam Greenlee. It's from 1969. And there was no other book that I believe is in conversation with Black Buck more than The Spook Who Sat by the Door. It's scary how it's almost one for one, not a startup, but the protagonist is basically the first Black person in the CIA, and he's learning from the inside out so that he can take those tools to then help basically educate guerrilla gangs in Chicago to fight the power. He's this double agent, and I was like, holy shit, this is just like Black Buck. Good thing I didn't read it before or while I was writing it, so I can't say that I copied. But yeah, those are definitely some influences.
Nice. That's a great. Those are great stories, and those are great recommendations. Well, I think we have time real quick. Are there any recent books or upcoming books that you or authors that you've encountered that you want to make sure the audience checks out?
I feel like I think this book came out in 2020, and I'm pretty sure that you mentioned it during your NBA, or at some point you might have mentioned it. How much of these, Charles? How much of these hills is gold by C. Pam Zhang? I thought that was incredible. Honestly, it's like one of the top books that I've recently read. I was thinking that there were actually tigers like on the western frontier of America at one point. The book felt so real. Yeah, that's one book that I really enjoyed. And Zakiya Dalila Harris is coming out with The Other Black Girl, which I haven't read, but I think it's going to be like the sister book to Black Buck. Of course, The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr. that came out the same day as Black Buck, masterful. Yeah, Charles, what about you? I know you can't talk about books that are like too recent.
Yeah, not this year's. I did love How Much of These Hills Gold. No one arranged this, but I'd love to plug Richard's book. I'm halfway through it, so it's
Hell
just
yeah.
this intricate web of seedy low lives. No, I don't know if that's actually a good characterization, but it's rich
in the
and
hot seat.
yeah. No, I really enjoyed it.
That means the world to me. You're right. I think even the kind of like wealthy characters in that book are pretty much like low lifes. And as usual, the actual low lifes aren't actually all that low. Thank you very much, guys. We've got a couple minutes left. Is there is there another point you want to leave the audience with about your work or about just kind of the state of things? And I have a feeling I'm going to take that back because that's way too broad of a question. But let me rephrase it this way. It feels like we're on the verge of opening back up, right? As a society, as a world. Granted, lots of people already were back in society well before they should have been. How do you feel about that? Are you ready to go back out there? Is it too weird? Are you too scared? Are you just ready to get out there? And what's it gonna be like for us?
I'll jump in. So I have very mixed feelings. I'll be honest. I'm kind of introverted, and I have enjoyed. We were talking before the event started a little bit about some of the virtues of virtual book touring. You get to talk to way more people, and you don't have to actually, be in the physical space. And so I don't know. I'm a little bit scared and nervous. But I'll be honest. But I've got kids. Unfortunately, I don't think I can keep them shut in the house until they're 30. I'd like to, but just because. But yeah. What about you, Mateo?
Mateo, before you answer, Charles, I read your Wired essay from last April, maybe like the beginning of April, about. Oh no, I'm sorry. Maybe it was in the Atlantic about like the world disappearing and our kind of overinflated sense of our importance to the world. And there's not really a question there other than me saying I hope that you write a follow-up or companion piece or something akin to that in a couple months once things are a little bit more open.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for reading. I'll try.
How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, so before the pandemic, I spent most of my time in my apartment working anyway. So it's like not much is going to change on that front. But something that I did lose from the pandemic, and of course, I mean, people fucking lost their lives, so it's like whatever. But I love to go out in the evenings, like go to the movies and just be able to eat and not look over my shoulder or feel weird about it. And of course, traveling. So when the world opens up, I'm going to be cautious, and I'm definitely not going to be one of these people just like out and about running around because I have too much to do anyway. But I would love to be able to, within reason, maybe make it to the UK at some point this year or next, for example, because the book's coming out there. Again, being able to eat out at places and not feel weird about it, see friends and hug family without also not feeling weird about it. So yeah, there's definitely trepidation, like Charles is saying, but I have the safeguard in that I had already spent so much time in my apartment, so that's not really going to change.
Well, thank you very much, Charles and Mateo, and thank you to the San Antonio Book Festival and to Lit Crawl, to everyone out there. Buy these books. Buy them from Nowhere Books. Some of them are going to be signed by Charles. Charles's book will be signed by Charles, not Mateo's book.
Charles, you can sign my book too.
I didn't tell you that. I signed 100 copies of your book, Mateo. It's
Thank
super
you.
Cool.
Hell yeah.
Support the author, support the festival, and come back tomorrow. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks,
Great
Mateo.
night.